Hello again, it's me. I'm currently taking a little bit of a study break from my actual schoolwork, and I wanted to continue to talk about this therapy idea that I've been developing. This is part of a larger series of videos on my YouTube where I'm basically unpacking all of these different elements of a therapy type that I've been designing for dissociation. Um, and trauma based on my lived experience. And it's been really, really fun. I've really been enjoying it. And I've just really had like a lot of inspiration essentially. It's also based on research that I'm hopefully finishing soon on a chemical that is, I think, at least part of the story when it comes to how dissociation works. So we're just going to jump in and I'm going to explain all the new little things that I've sort of imagined and thought about. All right, so in case this is the first time you've ever seen one of these videos, I basically have been developing this therapy. The therapy, it would be basically, I'm going to open the workbook here. It's for people that struggle with things like complex PTSD with some kind of dissociation element, struggle with like dissociative identity disorder, dissociative disorder not otherwise specified, dissociative amnesia, yeah, borderline personality disorder, maybe things like that that are rooted in trauma. This is all completely 100% like not researched yet. This is just for me for fun to keep track of my progress. I actually watch my own videos back to like inspire myself or remind myself or just reflect. So basically that's what these YouTube videos are for, but it's not real yet or anything and I still need to do a lot of research to actually get it there. So just FYI, but I just thought it would be fun to keep track of this adventure because this is coming all from my lived experience having dealt with recovered memories and with PTSD and everything, dissociative amnesia. So there's actually not a therapy out yet that's really specific to that. There's some that are actually really adjacent that I'm actually incorporating, but there's not a medication type. And I found a medication that I think could be really well suited for this. So I've just been sort of already kind of jumping the gun and just developing what I think that would look like outside of that. And that's really been based on the experiences that I had, recovering memories, and all of the sort of pitfalls and all of the ways that I think I could have had a better experience, and just putting that all into one cohesive sort of space. That's been sort of this little therapy thing. It's been very healing. I've really enjoyed it. So basically, it would just be taking this medication for a period of time, like maybe just off the top of my head, like 6 weeks with a talk therapy component, and then another period of time without, um, just with off the medication, but still using the same therapy techniques and still using the same framework, but just unpacking everything that was basically maybe came up during the time with the medication. I find that really important. I was actually reading, I was just casually reading on Reddit recently about psychedelic therapy and how it's not psychedelic therapy as in like you doing something like shrooms with a therapist, like essentially, and them guiding you through it. It's under research. It's definitely amazing. I think people should research it more and things like that. I've had personal experiences with shrooms and it was good, it was healing, but I think obviously I've had bad experiences. And yeah, I think it's definitely something that you should not take by yourself. If you have kind of trauma, you should take it with a therapist and therapist can walk you through it and everything. But that doesn't mean it's not like evil or bad. And I think it's great that we're expanding that kind of psychedelic research. Just anecdotally, okay, that's just my take on it. But I wanted to put that out there before I talk about the pitfalls so people aren't like, oh no, let's toss it because actually a great thing with more development. But basically, one of the things that people said were a pitfall is that some therapists were saying that it was actually giving people it can give people trauma if they aren't sort of well equipped enough to handle it because it's a very large experience. And sometimes people were leaving feeling more traumatized. And these are some of the pitfalls that I'm actually trying to like embrace or sort of work with in my actual therapy is that sometimes when you're really delving into your mind in a really deep way like that, it can bring up really like negativity. And for example, in the times that I've recovered memories, sometimes it's been good because I felt more whole or more like myself, but I always had a period of time where I felt worse. It was like really big and hard to handle and everything. And I want to embrace that in therapy and know that that is going to happen. That is going to be part of working through a traumatic experience, is that sometimes you get worse before you get better, and to sort of incorporate how to handle that. And some people were saying that in the psychedelic therapies, what was happening is that people were just doing that therapy with that sort of medication, which is the psychedelics, and then they were leaving therapy, and there wasn't a sort of recovery period with a therapist where they were unpacking it in a specialized way. And I think it's so important to have that period of time where you're just unpacking the experience and getting back to baseline. And that's been a big part of this entire thing for me. I've been kind of thinking of this is my little workbook I've been imagining, and I've kind of just been coming up with little central themes that I think are important based, literally, this is all based on my experience and then also some experiences that I've read from other people of, um, and this is also based on things that I've read that are pitfalls, for example, with recovered memory. What are some of the things that can go wrong when it comes to the concept of recovered memory that I think we need to do so much more research, and not stigmatize the experience. I think there's so much opportunity when it comes to these stigmatized places in therapy, sort of therapy work that could be better explored, but people don't like stigmatize it and then don't open up that box. So I feel like there's so much more potential for trauma than we kind of already have. So, for example, the psychedelic therapy stuff could be such a good opportunity for people, but we just stigmatize the psychedelics. And then there's so much more that we could sort of understand about confabulation or recovered memory and all the overlaps there, false memory, etc. That, but that's been so stigmatized that I think we haven't sort of explored it enough. And I've been thinking about that potential pitfall that basically needs to be on both ends. The therapist needs to be well informed, and basically the client needs to have certain tools to understand how to navigate recovered memory just in general. So I'm going to talk about, so I have one section that I think is really important, distress management, that I already went into in the last video, that knowing that those negative emotions are going to come up and it'll be very distressing, and that is going to happen. That's not like a maybe, or maybe that's a bad thing. It's like, no, that's part of it. And like, you should learn how to manage your distress so you can get more resilient and actually sit with the things you're dissociating from. Whereas if your brain is always distressed by those experiences, then it'll keep hiding them, or it won't ever sort of consolidate them. Is the issue. It's not even about hiding. I think it's just about consolidating. It's not going to consolidate the experience if the experience is too arousing. So learning how to manage arousal, learning how to take it, like not always be constantly in a state of high arousal, but to navigate arousal in a way that's like, kind of like weightlifting, like over time you get better at tolerating that distress and it gets to be less stressful. And then you can sit with bigger and more challenging parts of yourself over time. So it's about learning how to be balanced, learning how to moderate that for a while, but then also take it in small doses until it's not such a big issue. So I think that's one of the big themes. I have one that's going to be making sense of experiences. It doesn't need to be chapter 2. Maybe it should be more like chapter 3. Actually, you know what? I think this would be a cool thing for making sense of experiences. There's like a little sub theme here. That sub theme is more like tolerating uncertainty. That's what I was thinking about in when I was on getting off the plane. I've been thinking about that a lot with the issue of recovered memory. Is that something that was very distressing for me when I developed like dissociative when I realized that I had developed dissociative amnesia, because I didn't know that I was in that state for like a really long time, but I was in really intense sort of traumatic sort of emotions and things for about a year, that I didn't know how to, like, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand myself. Then I recovered memories after about a year, around the anniversary of the trauma, after I had cut off this individual and everything. So it was like a big process for me. And I started to recover memories a little after that. And it was very distressing for me to know that there was something under the surface. And I didn't even really like it, over time. I was after that period, I was extremely still dissociated for like another year. And then about maybe a year and a half later, I actually started to get more fragments coming up. And basically, my symptoms have changed over time. It's always been kind of distressing and frustrating, but I've had more ability to sort of manage my day-to-day life and to sort of view the world accurately. Like, it's changed. I have different things. First, I was like really, really severely, intensely having life-ending thoughts and feeling like I wanted to engage in risky behaviors and all these different things. Actually, I was very lost in that period of mental time. I almost wondered if I had borderline personality disorder. I didn't tell anybody that, but I was like, I just constantly was wanting to engage in risky behaviors. I felt like I just wanted to, like, sabotage my life in my first year to do things that were very like painful towards myself. I don't know if I can say words on YouTube, but I just had that kind of tendency for the first year, and it was really, really awful. I was really depressed, really in a lot of pain. And I had things that actually came up for me as triggers that I didn't understand why they triggered me at all. So that was my first sort of year of navigating trauma. The second year was this sort of like everything was sort of, I started to recover some memories, and then everything became really discombobulated internally. Like I felt like I was interpreting the world in a skewed way for about a year after. I was very much in my head all of the time. I felt very frozen, and like I couldn't really get up that, like, I was very much like I was just kind of stuck in bed a lot. I was, when I would go out for walks, I started to get really stressed and things. And then I also um had, like, there's a really intense inner world going on in my head for like the next maybe year and a half ish, and I was just having some really sort of intense difficulties there in terms of how I interpreted the world, because I think there's a lot of reasons that I kind of theorized, but also I feel like I wasn't really that aware of the external world, and a lot of times things were filtering into my head that I was interpreting them in a skewed way. Not like my memories and stuff, but like the external world, like, signs, the feelings in my body and stuff. Like I wasn't very in my body enough to really truly understand them. And then after about a year and a half of that, I got in a new space. I was like out, I was in the summer, I had more relaxation time. This is actually what led me to acetylcholine in the first place. I was like, I have more relaxation time. I have less on my mind because I wasn't in school. And then that fragment started to come up for me. I was like, whoa, this is really out of the blue. I wasn't expecting there to be more because I didn't realize I was dissociated. I had a very skewed reality that kind of covered up everything, where I was just like, sometimes thoughts came into my head that I felt like I was sort of reading people's minds and things like that. Um, and things that I would now probably say were like kind of Schneiderian sort of symptoms. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically feeling like there's kind of voices in your head and just stuff like that that were very complex sort of experiences that I didn't realize how distorted my reality was. I just thought that was my reality. And then I basically started to recover more memories and like fragments and stuff. It was like, whoa, what's happening? And this was after a few days of like derealization, sort of like nothing is real. I feel like I can't navigate. And after that, I became significantly less mobile. My head was better overall, had more awareness of my own mind. And the fact that I was navigating that experience and like, oh, I'm just still really dissociated, that was really useful information for me. But my body was in a state of high stress a lot. And I still struggled with those little like issues where I couldn't really always like feel very present, and I just felt very like frozen still. Then after some time, I went on healing, but what was useful about this is that I actually had the knowledge that I was dissociated essentially, and I was like, oh, there's things under the surface that I need to sort of get to, but I don't know. I need to relax. That was actually when it started to hit me. I was like, I need to relax more. Again, this all led to this arousal, acetylcholine stuff. I was like, I realized then, I was like, when I relax and when I have more free time, my mind puts the pieces together. And I want to get to a place in life where I'm just relaxing more. I need to rest. I need to let my head be still more and all these different things, where that was about the next 2 years, kind of where I've been, where I don't have that sort of skewed reality, at least I think. I feel pretty like here, but I'm still like, when I walk around, I really struggle sometimes because my mind is so stressed. Like I just feel it's not my mind, it's my body. Because it's not really I'm thinking anything. It's like my body is in this really intense high stress state where people are like, and I start to get these little blinky things and like all these little physical manifestations of just being really, 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 really stressed out and feeling like I can't get my body to relax, even though my mind's not stressed. And which makes sense if you've read stuff like The Body Keeps Score. I'm actually wanting. I just got that book, so I can actually read the book, but I've read like the papers and stuff, and basically just really deregulated all the time and stuff, and but much better. And recently, I've actually had a bit of a breakthrough where I started to feel my own body more and just be like, oh, there, like, I think I've just been really more aware of like, oh, I'm angry. Like, usually I'm like very stressed and I'm like, oh, I'm really thirsty. I didn't even realize I was thirsty. Or Um, I just stuff like that. Like I'm really I think I realized recently I was like, "Oh, I'm exhausted." I didn't even realize that I was exhausted. And so I've just had this really intense sort of experience of coming back into my own body over time and just seeing like how my mind navigated each of those different stages. And that's what I've been like translating into this book, and it's been really useful to see like how what does it look like to heal from dissociation and stuff. Where like each and every stage requires, just a commitment to resting and to being patient with yourself and everything like that, and it gets better. But those are the different stages I went through, and I'm sure people on the even more extreme end of me, you probably, I had that really intense sort of like I want to, I was even doing stuff really out of character for me at that time. I was like shoplifting. I felt really risky, and like I was like I just want to go out and I want to do risky things that I didn't do, but I really felt inclined to do them a lot, and that was the beginning of my healing journey right at the start. And I'm sure that when you get to the more extreme end of the spectrum, for people that went through even more chronic trauma than me, you probably get stuff like borderline personality disorder and the dissociative identity disorder sort of, I think it's all in a spectrum and in this range of like how your mind is tolerating the world. And obviously there's still differences, but that was kind of the stages that I went through that helped me get here. So but that took a lot of sitting with different fragments of myself, learning how to like giving myself space to rest, even when things like aren't always perfect on the surface. Like, oh, I have a lot to do, but like, no, my body needs me to rest. And it's a very physical experience, I think. I just think dissociation is an incredibly physical experience, even though you're so outside of your own body that you need to get back in your body more. And that's like a really big challenge in general. So basically, yeah, that's what I'm doing here essentially right now is just adding these little themes that I've learned along the way, different themes and lessons that I learned getting myself back to baseline. And one of those was tolerating uncertainty. This was when I was really having those internal stories and internal issues. What I think it was is that my mind and my body stopped being able to cope with there's a few different ways this theme manifested for me. I stopped being able to cope with uncertainty because my body felt so unsafe, I think, is one reason. I was like, I can't deal with the uncertainty of not knowing what people are thinking. I don't know if people like me. I don't know if this, or usually it feels like, well, whatever, right? My body stopped being able to cope with certainty a lot. And because I just wanted to feel safe. And that's where I think the reality building came in, where I was like, I think that it felt safer to create an internal reality that made sense and that I had this sort of sense of certainty over than it felt to basically feel like I don't know what's happening or I don't understand myself. So, for example, instead of feeling like, oh, I don't really know what these people are thinking, it's like, I know what they're thinking. They're thinking this, where that actually regulated me at the time, even though over time I was like, oh, this is causing me issues and stuff. It's not right and it feels off, but it was like a certainty building kind of situation where it feels very unsafe to tolerate uncertainty when you're very, very deregulated and your body just can't tolerate it very well. And I think that that's one of the big things that I learned. And there was other ways that this manifested as well. So I'm going to write these down. I think this goes back to that sort of distress management as well of like I feel uncertainty distressed me horribly. I didn't like, I mean, to this day I'm still working on it, but it really scared me to feel like I don't know what's coming next. I don't know what's happening next. And it was like an obsession. Like my mind developed this compulsion where I needed to sort of understand what people were thinking and what was going on behind the scenes. I wonder if this might be relevant for people with like trauma related psychosis kind of symptoms where I was like, I just can't deal with that right now. And it was much easier to jump into stories that I dissociated into. Even though actually like the reality probably wouldn't even have been that bad. Like, there's not really that much going on. There's not actually that much happening behind the scenes, and it's really not that deep, but every bit of uncertainty felt so horrible to me. The other way I think that tolerating uncertainty was a big theme of my healing was when it came to actually recovering memories and feeling like, for me, this was a unique way that my sort of dissociative amnesia actually made me feel. And I'm sure it might be the same for people with, I don't know, CPTSD, where you can't remember your childhood that well, or, things like that, where how do the pieces connect? What is my life? Where was I? How did I, I, it really, it was a big struggle for me to be like, I don't understand. I have pieces, but I don't understand how the pieces connect, and I really wanted to understand how the pieces connect. I had a period of time where I had a lot of fragments coming up, and I was just like, I had things even coming up from like my childhood and stuff like that that I was like, oh, sometimes they came up. This is the thing about memory, is that it's really kind of strange, and sometimes I had memories from my childhood come up in that period where I was like, it wasn't. Oh, well, it's a long story, but anyways, basically, I was just very, very like concerned with how the pieces of my fragments connected for like a period of like 2, 3 months, and it became kind of anxiety inducing and obsessive. And I also had I worried, am I getting it right? Am I getting it wrong? What if I don't understand myself? And then I got into this paranoia about things that I had recovered. Like, what if I didn't get that together right? And I think that's one of the big struggles of navigating this particular trauma in a societal context, where especially where we have that sort of liar thing where it's like you're a liar or something, where there's a immense pressure to understand yourself correctly. If you don't understand yourself correctly, there's some kind of, like you're horrible, or all these different things that I think we generate this kind of this sense, this feeling collectively. And even I think in psychology itself, where it's like this confabulation issue, where it's like, I think it's extremely normal to actually, first of all, want to understand your own fragments and your own pieces of yourself. And also, just because you have pieces of you that you don't understand, like there's not, um, it's a process, like it's a long process of understanding and unpacking yourself. And it's like there's no instant sort of, nobody's getting hurt right now if I maybe like, I think also sometimes, I want to study this more, but I feel like you put together things sometimes where like this is what I was going to say earlier. Basically, I had pieces of my memories coming up, and they kind of like came into these little clumps where it's like, oh, childhood and my situation, where actually there was correct elements of both pieces of things that I had actually dissociated from and forgotten, but they kind of clumped together, and that wasn't accurate, but the pieces actually were accurate to things that I hadn't remembered. So like, okay, something from like my childhood that was kind of just like extremely distressing to me that I hadn't thought about for a long time, and then a piece of my traumatic experience, or just it came together with that concept, or I had a lot coming up, and then it felt like one thing, where actually they were things that I had kind of just lost to, completely for a period of time, where I actually went home and had a conversation with somebody, and they were like, oh yeah, that actually, like, it wasn't, it was just something like random that kind of just got like lost in the wind sort of, and it clumped. I think there's all these little strange ways that memory manifests, where we shouldn't instantly assume like, oh, it's like, this is really sort of black and white thing. Ironically, I think in therapy and in psychology, of like, it's either right or it's wrong, where it's not necessarily that black and white, I think, when it comes to memory and when it comes to the way that we put together our own minds after trauma. It's like a very complex experience. And I think there's such a massive sort of like what's wrong with you thing when it comes to, not what's wrong with you, but this massive panic when it comes to like the court system and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, maybe you should go through a bit of therapy and understand yourself before you necessarily jump into court. Then again, for example, people are very, there's always this thing of like, well, why didn't you go to court? Why didn't you say something? So it's a lot of societal pressures that actually I think really come into play in like a therapy space, where it's like there needs to be less pressure and less stress, and it's like it's okay to not understand everything 100% immediately, and it's like a long process as well. And that's what I think is like really important about this entire therapy stuff, is like how it's not even just about the patient, but also how we navigate it in psychology, and navigating it with almost more maturity in psychology as well, navigating it with more maturity and patience and everything as therapists as well, that like it's a long process, and people, memory is very, very confusing and stuff. It doesn't mean that everything is wrong just because it's not perfect, but that it's a process, and that people shouldn't feel the pressure to just like, now I'm immediately going to go like confront somebody. It's like, slow down and feel that, and then you can go in and sort of sort it all out, stuff like that. I think conversation that should be being had, where it's very anxiety inducing to recover a memory, and I think it's more about how do you meet people, um particularly if they're meeting sort of instances from, I don't know, um like a family, oh, my stepdad did this, or stuff like that, where it's very, very normal to be like really in a state of shock and anxiety and just like, my life is a lie. And it's really dark, but I think there's a lot to sort through there and stuff, and it's about helping people like slow down and understand themselves well, and make sure that you don't have to know 100% yet, and like managing also the distress of like, oh, my, now I'm reconfiguring my entire life all of a sudden. So I don't really have anything to like add for that yet. I just know that that's going to be a theme as well, is helping people to make peace with uncertainty, particularly because a lot of times it's you're not going to deal with everything in like a 6 week period. You're going to continue to work on it for a very, very long time. And it's about just making peace with what's sort of been uncovered, and also being like, it's okay to not know the full story. And also, even I feel like explaining the science of everything is so useful too, for people to understand what's happening. And it's actually scientifically sort of makes sense based on things I've been reading recently, for you to not always have a full picture, because sometimes there wasn't what was important to your brain. Also, on the other end, I think that like, you might have really just encoded the more important parts of a piece of the story, and you don't have everything, and that's just kind of how trauma works. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's always more under the surface, but that's just how trauma kind of works. And exactly that, I think sometimes it's like, maybe you don't remember your full childhood, for example, for like people where that's the case for them. I get a lot of people, I hear a lot of people on like social media, where they think like, I'm wondering if something really awful happened to me in my childhood because I can't remember things that well. And it doesn't always mean that you don't remember, like, it's not always that something absolutely horrible was under the surface. There might be a few distressing memories, and then you might have just associated some, and sometimes what's under the surface is just everyday material. I think that you just develop that dissociation, and then sometimes what's under, there's like some things that were really hard to tolerate, a few more central memories, and then some other things that were just like everyday stuff. Sometimes I recover memories, quote unquote, that are just normal pieces of what I was doing in that period of time. Sort of like, oh, I didn't really remember that, but now I just got like a fragment, or, oh, I haven't, that was actually really important to me back then, but I didn't really think about that until just recently. But it wasn't traumatic. It's just that that's kind of how brains work, is that things kind of just get a little bit lost in the fuzz. But it doesn't always mean that there's something really awful and like the most crazy, insane thing happened to me. It's like, yeah, you might have just been a bit, there's that sort of post trauma effect. There's the fact that sometimes when your brain gets into that, when you get in a high stress mode, it starts to kill off, sort of make it kill off the LTP. That's not really the best way to do the memories that we're already consolidating. It starts to sort of like chunk them out, and they get a little bit less sort of consolidated. The things that were happening previously that were a bit more vulnerable, like let's say you just ate some ice cream that day, but then you got in a car accident like 2 hours later, and your brain was still consolidating the ice cream situation, but like now this traumatic experience happened. It's like it kind of makes the ice cream stuff like kind of tosses it to focus on the more important thing. And that means that sometimes it's not necessarily something awful, but maybe just things that were sort of like part of your day to day that you just kind of forgot, and it becomes part of like the haze. So I think it's also about like teaching people to just be okay with tolerating a little bit of like, I don't really remember, but it doesn't necessarily mean that something awful happened to me. It just might mean that I was a bit dissociated, maybe my brain kind of tossed it, or you just forgot. Like, it's very normal also for people to forget things, you know and a lot of people don't remember everything about their memories, because some of it really just wasn't that important. And like your brain isn't really that interested in it, and like nobody remembers their entire life in like hyper detail as well, and that's also. So I think there's all these different things that kind of like you kind of have to relearn them it once you develop some kind of dissociative amnesia, because I feel like you're so it's a big thing. Again, like I think that that's the compassion and the kindness I think people need to have towards dissociative experiences. It's like it's a massive thing to process, where most people don't have to think about that stuff. You just go about your day and your memories are just your memories. If you don't remember something, it's like, well, whatever, I just didn't remember. But all of a sudden, like you have this intense scrutiny over the fact that like, oh, I don't remember, or, why don't I remember? There could be something terrifying under the surface, and all these different things that you start to navigate that you never had to navigate before. And it's a lot to kind of unpack and a lot to process. And I think that people need support on that. And it's not and just like lower the sort of like intensity of that whole entire concept by a lot, and give people more tools to actually understand how their memory works, more science to understand how their memory works, more like sort of grounded sort of thinking processes about memory in general, because memory is very complex and confusing and stuff. So yeah, that was kind of like I had this constant anxiety after this experience of like, what more could there be under this? And also, like, what if all of it is wrong? What if I'm remembering correctly? Does that make me a bad person? Like all these anxieties of like of dissociation and dissociative amnesia that take a lot of it takes a lot of time to kind of sort through. And I think that's actually something to work through too in therapy as a bit. I'm not going to say it's not like people develop PTSD from it per se, but it was also highly traumatic in its own way to recover memory and to feel like my entire worldview and my entire sense of self just shifted overnight. And like, what's happening to me and who am I now? And all these different things where it's like, it's a big experience to process in and of itself, to feel like all of a sudden that you're like, I can't trust my brain anymore. And my brain was doing something without my control that was really massive and impactful, and all these different things. And I think it's like that was, it completely discombobulated me, I will say. I feel like to this day, I feel really discombobulated by that, and just like what, and like still just trying to wrap my head around it and like how I feel and everything. And it's a really big thing. I would say it's a big life change to feel like you recovered a memory, and like now it's like, what do I do with that, and how do I learn to trust my own head again and trust my brain and feel kind of baseline, is really really hard. And I felt this intense skepticism towards myself and my experience and my memory and everything, that really was painful and frustrating and everything. So I think it's also another thing to kind of be sensitive of with this experience. Just easing the panic, essentially. I'm gonna draw this up and I'm gonna show it to you. I said in the last video, I was imagining a little online portal that's like a therapy workbook. I want to make like a book version of this and an online portal version. I really want to read books about like internal family systems and stuff, because I want it to be kind of modeled or based off of that. Maybe you can have different little platforms. Let's manifest it. One day I'll be well connected enough to actually meet or like work with people that do this kind of therapy or that develop the therapy. But I want to do a little online platform that I've been kind of thinking about, how do you guide people through their fragments and stuff. And I thought it would be cool to have a little space where people can kind of honor and mark those fragments without feeling like they have to sort of put them into a timeline immediately. So I'm going to show you how I imagine that. Oh, I had a whole other thing that I was thinking about. My notes app, and it was anchor memories. I don't know if that's already a thing, but I was thinking about how even though I don't remember everything, there's things that I do remember well and that I can put in a timeline. And that's, I would say, like anchor memories, memories that I feel very certain of and that I don't feel any kind of shiftiness towards. And they're kind of my anchor of like, what do I understand about this experience? And I feel like they're a good place to start, of lowering the arousal around those anchor memories, and feeling at peace with those anchor memories, so that more things can sort of come up, like, oh, I feel at peace with that, now I have more space to understand myself. I thought this would be particularly useful for people that have, for example, like something like dissociative identity disorder, where you can start to, it'd be like an online thing, essentially, like like, let me show you, yeah, kind of like an example website. One of these types of websites like Trello or something, where you can just pin little things, something like that, where people can make like there would be one piece where you can make kind of like a timeline, and then like I'm gonna sort of make up little storylines. So I imagine a space like a timeline that basically automatically starts to sort of make itself, and you can sort of just write down, for example, everything that you have, like, okay, this happened then and this happened then. First of all, I thought it'd be very grounding to see that you actually have that kind of like, there's something there, and you can sort of see it in this sort of format. And then as people add things, well, first of all, let's go into how the bubbles would kind of also be kind of cool. Is that I thought it would be cool because either people, I don't know, like maybe it can be very freeform. People can maybe write down, like kind of journal about their experience throughout here, and then you can sort of get that little sense of like, oh, here's the story rather than just floating. But I also think it would be kind of nice, for example, if people have alters, like if they have dissociative identity disorders, they can also put like the name, who's saying this. I don't know, Joe the alter, and have like different. You can maybe have different like viewpoints. Well, Joe says this, but I don't know. I'm just making up names. Sally says like this, and you can get these sort of you can get these sort of like a bigger sort of story of the kind of experience, and this can be accessed by the therapist and also accessed by the client. And I think for places that maybe don't have computer access or something, you could do like a book version, but I thought it would be a really really cool thing to just kind of like there's like a box where people can go in and you can like there's like what's the date, what's the this, it basically, and people can like kind of write it like this. It doesn't just have to be bad memories, it can be good memories too, like my dad and I went fishing. There's like a text box or something, and then there would be like a year box. And then what basically happens is that once you kind of press enter, it's like everything goes into this little like box cloud and it just goes like beep 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 beep. And it's like here. And then you get to see that full little storyline. Or if you don't have a year, this is what I thought would be kind of cool. If you just have a fragment, if it doesn't have a time, it doesn't have a place, it can just kind of go up into this little like blurby cloud. Like, okay, at some point in time, my dad and I went fishing. Don't remember when it happened, but it's there. And I just feel like it would give first personally it would have given me peace of mind. Just be like, okay. Also because sometimes my memories go in and out. Like I had things that were very vivid for me, and then they kind of like faded. I really want to do more research on reconsolidation because I have theories on that and how that works and why that works and everything. But I feel like it just sometimes things are just like, okay, now it's a little bit too much for me to face again, or just stuff like that where it's like, okay, but it's there. And I think it would be a really, really cool tool to have something like this where people can, let's say you're at home and you like, oh my God, this just came into my head or something, you can kind of write it down and people can have this sort of timeline of their experience. And I feel like that would really help me because sometimes it's like, it's hard to put everything into a timeline, but you kind of minimize the work and minimize the stress. And it's like, oh, okay. And you can see how your different alters were sort of communicating about it. Maybe there can be a space for that. All these different things in this cool little journal format, I think would be really, really cool. And a good tool for therapists as well, because they might be able to sort of get a sense of things or see things that maybe people are too sort of in a state of stress to really see, or, oh, I'm kind of getting a sense of like maybe what happened here, or, stuff like that, that I think would just be kind of useful, like a useful tool for people with this kind of experience. And, maybe people over time look at it and they're like, oh, that's kind of the full story. Like, that's really what happened. Or I don't think there's really anything more to that. I feel really at peace with like, that's the story of my life and that's what happened. And just helping people get that sense of like autobiographically, like what's going on, would be kind of a cool, I think, program for people. And I really want to do like little online platform too. And I would really think it'd be cool, like there could be different spaces too, maybe. There could be like a cool, like I'm just imagining the whole entire thing, but like there could be a cool space maybe for different sort of experiences, just like an online journal with prompts. This is the internal family system kind of thing. And I think it would be cool to have like a dedicated, maybe like a dedicated, like this is like a web page. Okay, this is like page one, got a little tab. Here's another page. People can basically just do some journaling, some freeform journaling about like maybe describing themselves more, describing their different systems and things, and like talking about it. Maybe there can be like a version of this where they get like different ways they get tagged. So like also this could be tagged with like different internal family systems names. Like this is my protector said this. And then there's kind of like another, like you can kind of basically like, let's say I'm going to try to create it here for you. Maybe like if you press a certain tag feature, it kind of reworks itself where it's like, oh, this is all like this was all my manager's information. Where you're like, oh, my manager's like really, really active. My manager's got like a lot of memory content is coming from like my manager. Essentially, there's like a lot of manager content. And then here's the self, and the self has like a little bit. And then here, all of these memories are tagged as like the firefighters. Would be kind of cool. And then people can get a sense of how their family system is working. I think that would be pretty cool. And then also, specific to people with dissociative identity disorder, you could also have a like a alter sort of page or something where people maybe have like, not everything is going to be relevant to everybody, right? But it's just like a page with like a lot of different sort of online resources for people with these traumas, where it's like, okay, meet like Joe or something. And it would be kind of cool because the thing about alters is that they actually shift as you heal. And a lot of times, like, people can start with a lot and then they go to a little, or they change, and then it kind of just gives a space for people to have like a little bit of like a little tracker, like a little tracker of like, okay, Sally, and this is what Sally's about, and this is like all the memory content that Sally has sort of offered up, is like, Sally said this and this and this and that, and like, here's all of the like the clouds of Sally's memories, and then on the other hand, you have Joe, and these are all the memory tags that align with Joe, and they're kind of tagged already with the memory. So if you want to see it that way, and it kind of just moves things around based on how you tag it, and like what's tagged, and like who does this align with, or does it align with a certain family system? Does it align with a certain altar? Or do you want to see it chronologically? And it kind of just moves your memories around that way, and the little tags and things. I think that'd be a pretty cool way of helping people kind of get a bigger sense of like what's going on, and then also over time, like, they can sort of like retag it, like, oh wow, now Sally has ceased to exist and everything is Joe, because Joe realized that actually the abuse happened to him, and he didn't need to protect Sally. So now everything's going to just go over to Joe, because Joe actually experienced Joe and Sally's information. And then you can kind of like renew the tags, and then boop, Sally's out of the system. I think that'd be such a cool thing to do, and that would be such a helpful way, I think, for people to see their memories. Obviously, not everything's going to be relevant to everybody, so this wouldn't be relevant to me, but this could be relevant to me, for example, in the experience I went through, and this could be relevant to me, like, by a lot. Actually, I wish I had this. And I just think that'd be pretty cool and stuff if done with sensitivity, and just like, okay, um, people can put like maybe like a trigger on it. If they don't want to see a certain trigger, they can like tag out the trigger, like, no sexual abuse today because I can't deal with that. But here's all the other ones. Just stuff like that, where it's like a little like mind map of all of your memories. I think would be such a cool thing to basically, like, I put it here with like this little online platform. Because also, I think if people are taking a medication, like, sometimes all that stuff is coming up really, maybe really rapid fire, or like, I'm scared I'm not going to remember this. So it's just like, I think a good little like combo journal, just like an online journal. Be even cool if it looked like a journal. I'm very like into visuals and stuff, as you can tell. Like, I like to make zines and stuff. And be cool if it looked like had like a little diary kind of vibe to it. Like, yeah, it would be kind of, I think, I imagine now I'm really getting into a creative headspace with it. This is kind of fun. Like, I like doing this kind of stuff. Once I learn how to code or something, I was like, I'm gonna be going crazy. Like, I'm gonna be making so much cool stuff. But like, in the beginning, it could have you put all your name in, and then it's got like, this would be a good thing to have on trial, like on hand too, for like if someone wanted to go into like a legal setting or something, or also if people deal with like gaslighty family or something, or it's like, are you sure that happened to you? Are you sure? It's like, I wrote it down. You're not gonna make me forget it. Like, it's here if you need something for like a therapy, or like if you need to have somebody like, speak in court or something. Well, I wrote all this down with my therapist and this medication. We have everything here, the year, the everything. It'd be kind of fun. Like, people could even, maybe they can customize it. Like, there's different like, those iPad apps. Everything is kind of like coming together for me. This Good Notes app. I think I use this to take notes, even though I don't have an Apple Pencil myself. But I do, I think it's this one. But anyways, you can basically make like all these little books in your iPad, and basically could be something like that, and it could look like a book, and people could kind of customize, so choose their own colors. I just think it would be so much fun. Obviously, the content won't be fun, but it's like a at least it makes it personalized, and it's kind of cool, and I think hopefully people develop a good relationship to their little notebooks, you know? I think it's the reason I think this is also good is that people, for example, people with dissociative identity disorder, they actually have a hard time remembering, like when they switch alters, they forget stuff that happens in other parts as well, you know? I think it'd be good to have like that little record also of like, you know, also it could be a good place for people to write like, I don't know, their experience with the actual medication. How's that going? Did you have any run-ins with your emergency contact? And the first few, like maybe the first page or something, or somewhere on this web page that I'm imagining, it would have like just all their information, emergency contact information, um, therapist information, just everything. What's your dose? What's everything? Just like it's like a page. You know, like it's just kind of good. It would kind of be like just an online platform version of the book that they already have. So again, it can maybe be optional because I know that maybe it's not always going to be a situation where people have a computer or I don't know, but I just thought it'd be a cool like side thing, and this can all just be on paper as well, but be like an online thing where they just have like a tab with their sort of information, their dose, their everything, and then a tab with like this sort of cloudy sort of journal thing, maybe a tab with some special videos they can watch if they want to watch videos and stuff like that. So yeah. All right, that's essentially it for now. Basically that's what I was imagining on my off when I got off the plane. I just started having this little thought process about all that. So yeah, it's just really building, I think. And I want to do a lot of reading because these are all just themes that I think are important that I'm trying to center. But I obviously, they're later on down the line, like, you know, in a few years. I don't know. I don't know my future. I don't know. Am I doing clinical stuff? I don't know. But, anyways, but I do want to do extensive reading about, like, you know, this is like a PhD thing or something later. Do extensive reading about these therapy types that are good for dissociation, internal family systems, whatever, and you know, talk to clinicians, etc., and just do some collaborations about like what would a good talk therapy look like for this. Also, I still need to see like is this a good medication or something? You know, just a lot of different information that I kind of need. But I was just thinking a lot about my own experience with dissociation and like what are the central facets. What have I learned from reading about, you know, stuff like about confabulation, the different issues with dissociation, about clinicians that are actually working with people with dissociation. And those are all just the things that I've basically reflected on recently. So yeah, anyways, I guess that's it for now.